there is a specific kind of silence that exists only in the aftermath of a decision that changes everything. It is not the quiet of an empty room, nor the peace of a morning before the world wakes up. It is a heavy, pressurized silence, the kind that settles in your bones when you realize that the person you trusted most has signed a document that effectively erases you from their future. I remember the sound of the pen cap clicking shut. It was a small sound, insignificant in the grand scheme of the city outside the window, but in that boardroom, it sounded like a gavel striking soundless wood. Julian Thorne did not look at me when he signed the settlement papers. He looked at the lawyer, then at the window, and then he stood up. He did not say goodbye. He did not offer an explanation. He simply walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the evidence of his choice. That was 5 years ago. I was 30 then, naive enough to believe that love was a constant variable in the equation of life, foolish enough to think that history and affection could outweigh the cold logic of a balance sheet. I was wrong, or so I thought. In the moments following his departure, I did not cry. I did not scream. I gathered the papers. I folded them neatly. I placed them in my bag. I walked out of the building and into the rain that was falling over Manhattan, letting the water soak through my coat because I wanted to feel something other than the numbness spreading through my chest. I told myself that this was clarity. I told myself that Julian had chosen his empire over us, and that I needed to accept the data point for what it was. But the human heart is not a computer. It does not simply delete files because they are corrupted. It archives them. It keeps them in the background, running processes that drain your battery, slowing you down, whispering questions that you try to ignore. I went home to the apartment we had shared, though it felt like it belonged to him even then. I packed a single suitcase. I left the key on the counter. I drove north, away from the skyline, away from the memory of his cologne and the sound of his voice in the hallway. I needed distance. I needed to rebuild the architecture of my life on a foundation that did not include him. I found a house in Connecticut, something modest with a garden that needed work. I took a job that utilized my skills but kept me away from the high-stakes world he inhabited. I became a consultant for nonprofits, helping them structure their finances, finding order in chaos. It was safe work. It was quiet work. And for the first few months, I thought I was healing. I thought the pain was fading. But then, the nausea started. It was subtle at first, a morning sickness that I attributed to stress, to the change in diet, to the lack of sleep. But when it persisted into the second month, I bought a test. I sat on the closed lid of the toilet in the small bathroom of the rental house, watching the little window change color. 2 lines, blue, distinct, unmistakable. I stared at it for a long time. I did not feel joy. I did not feel panic. I felt a profound sense of responsibility. I was carrying a part of him, a biological fact that tied me to a man who had just signed a document to sever ties. I had a choice to make. I could call him. I could tell him. I could demand that he see the evidence, that he acknowledge the life growing inside me. But I remembered the way he had looked at the lawyer. I remembered the way he had walked out without looking back. If he had chosen to leave me when it was just the two of us, what would he do when the stakes were higher? What would his family do? The Thornes were not just wealthy. They were institutional. They protected their assets with a ferocity that bordered on predatory. I had seen the way his father looked at me, like I was a liability on a spreadsheet. If I told Julian now, would he try to take the child? Would he try to control the situation through lawyers and NDAs? Or would he feel trapped? I knew Julian. I knew his sense of duty. If he felt forced, he would resent me. And I could not raise a child in an atmosphere of resentment. I could not bring a child into a war zone, so I made a decision. It was not a decision born of anger, but of protection. I would not tell him. I would raise this child alone. I would build a life where the child was safe from the sharks that circled his father's world. I would keep the truth hidden until I was sure that the water was safe. It was a cruel choice, perhaps, to deny a father knowledge of his child, but I told myself it was necessary. I told myself I was shielding them both. Then, the ultrasound revealed there were 2, twins, a boy and a girl, Leo and Mia. When they were born, the pain of Julian's absence was still there, but it was overshadowed by the sheer magnitude of loving them. They were perfect. They were quiet babies, observant. Leo had his father's eyes, a deep, piercing gray that seemed to look right through you. Mia had my hair, dark and unruly. Watching them grow was the most intense education I have ever received. I learned patience. I learned that love is not a feeling, but an action, a series of deliberate choices made every day. I learned that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I built a career that allowed me to work from home. I created a routine that was stable and predictable. We had dinners at 6. We read books at 7. We slept at 8. It was a good life. It was a full life. But there was a hole in it. A silence. Sometimes, when Leo would tilt his head to look at something, I would see Julian so clearly it hurt. I would have to look away. I would have to busy myself with dishes or laundry to stop the tears from coming. I never spoke about their father. I told them he was away, that he was working far away. I did not want to poison them with a story of betrayal before they were old enough to understand the nuance. I wanted them to form their own opinions when the time came. I wanted the truth to be available to them, not filtered through my pain. So I waited. I waited for the anger to subside. I waited for the logic to return. I waited for the day when I could look at the situation without feeling the sting of abandonment. And slowly, over the course of 5 years, the sting did fade. It was replaced by a cool, hard clarity. I understood that Julian had made a choice based on the information he had at the time. I understood that I had made a choice based on my fear. We were two people who had failed to communicate, failed to trust, and had paid the price in time. I was 35 now. The children were 6. They were asking more questions. They wanted to know why other kids had daddies who came to soccer practice. They wanted to know why we didn't have pictures of him on the wall. I knew I could not keep the secret forever. The pressure was building. And then, the external world intervened. I was working on a project for a housing initiative in the city. It was a large-scale development, meant to provide affordable units in gentrifying neighborhoods. It was the kind of work I loved, practical and impactful, but the funding was complicated. It required a partnership with a private equity firm. I was in a meeting with the board of directors when the name came up. Thorn Capital. I froze. I was holding a pen, and I remember setting it down very carefully so it wouldn't roll off the table. They wanted Julian's firm to be the primary investor. It made sense. They had the capital. They had the reach. But it meant I would have to work with them. It meant I would have to be in the same room as him. My instinct was to recuse myself, to walk away, to protect the children and myself from the disruption. But I looked at the project plans. This housing initiative was important. It would help hundreds of families. If I walked away because of a personal history, I would be letting my emotions dictate professional integrity. I had spent 5 years teaching myself to be governed by logic, by truth, by clarity. I could not abandon that now, so I stayed. I took the lead on the negotiation. I told myself I was ready. I told myself I was armored. But you cannot armor yourself against 5 years of silence. The first meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in a conference room in Midtown. I arrived early. I chose a seat at the far end of the table, away from the head. I wanted to observe. I wanted to see him before he saw me. When he walked in, the air in the room changed. He was taller than I remembered, or perhaps I had just shrunk in my own life. He looked older. There were lines around his eyes, deep grooves that spoke of stress and lack of sleep. His hair was darker, cut sharp and severe. He wore a suit that cost more than my car, but it hung on him loosely, like he had lost weight. He did not look like a man who had won. He looked like a man who was surviving. He walked to the head of the table. He opened his briefcase. He did not look up until everyone was seated. Then, his eyes swept the room. They passed over the lawyers, the architects, the city officials. And then they landed on me. There was no shock, no gasp, just a stillness. His gray eyes locked onto mine, and for a second the room disappeared. It was just the two of us, 5 years apart, separated by a table and a lifetime of unsaid words. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply nodded, a small, almost imperceptible acknowledgement. Then he began to speak. His voice was the same. Low, resonant, controlled. He talked about the project, about the ROI, about the timeline. He was professional. He was distant. He treated me like a vendor, like a stranger. And that hurt more than if he had yelled. If he had yelled, it would have meant he felt something. But this indifference, this was a wall. I watched him throughout the meeting. I watched the way he tapped his pen against the table when he was thinking. I watched the way he rubbed his left thumb over his ring finger, a habit he had when he was anxious. He was anxious. Why would Julian Thorne be anxious? He owned the room. He owned the capital. He held all the cards. Yet there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He was guarding something. I decided then that I would not react. I would not let him see that I was affected. I would match his professionalism. I would speak only when necessary. I would keep my voice steady. We got through the meeting. We shook hands at the end. His hand was cold. Dry. He held mine for a second longer than necessary, then let go. I walked out of the building and stood on the sidewalk. The city was loud. Taxis were honking. People were rushing past. I felt dizzy. I had thought I was ready. I had thought I had processed the pain. But seeing him had opened a door I had nailed shut. I went home that night and watched Leo and Mia playing in the living room. They were building a tower out of blocks. They were laughing. They were innocent. They had no idea that their father was 20 miles away, signing checks that would build homes for people they would never meet. I sat on the floor with them. I hugged them tight. I smelled their hair. I promised myself that I would not let this project destroy the peace we had built. I would handle this. I would handle him. Over the next few weeks, we met several times. The dynamic remained the same, professional, cold, efficient. But I began to notice things, small inconsistencies. He would cancel meetings at the last minute, citing emergencies that never seemed to materialize. He would stay late in the office, long after everyone else had left. I saw him once, through the glass wall of his office, sitting at his desk with his head in his hands. He looked exhausted, defeated. This was not the Julian I knew. The Julian I knew was tireless. He was driven. He did not sit with his head in his hands. Something was wrong. I began to ask questions, not openly. I did not want to alert him. I spoke to his assistant, a woman named Sarah who had worked with him for years. We had coffee one afternoon. I asked her how he was doing. She hesitated. She looked around the lobby to make sure no one was listening. Then she leaned in. She told me that he had been under immense pressure, that the firm was facing a hostile takeover attempt from a rival group, that there were lawsuits, that his father was trying to force him out of the company. She told me that the settlement 5 years ago, the one that had cut me off, was not what it seemed. She said Julian had been forced to sign it to protect his assets from being seized by creditors. If he had kept me on the books, if he had kept our joint accounts open, I would have been liable. I would have been dragged into the litigation. He had signed me away to save me. I sat there in the coffee shop, the cup warm in my hands, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. He hadn't chosen money over me. He had chosen my safety over his own happiness. He had taken the hit so I wouldn't have to, and he had never told me. Why? Because he knew I would argue. He knew I would want to fight beside him. And he knew that if I fought beside him, I would get hurt. He had made the cruel choice to save me from the cruelty of his world. And in doing so, he had lost me. The irony was suffocating. We had both made sacrifices based on love, and both had interpreted them as betrayal. We had both been wrong. We had both been right. I left the coffee shop and walked to my car. I sat there for a long time, watching the rain start to fall again. It was the same rain as 5 years ago, but I was different. I was not the same woman who had driven away in anger. I was a mother. I was a professional. I was a woman who valued truth over vengeance. I knew what I had to do. I could not let this continue. I could not let the misunderstanding stand between us any longer. But I also knew I couldn't just tell him. I couldn't just walk into his office and say, "I know the truth." That would put him on the defensive. He was a man who controlled narratives. He would try to spin it. He would try to protect me again. I needed to create a space where the truth could surface naturally. I needed to force a conversation where he had no choice but to be honest. I waited for the next scheduled meeting. It was a site visit. We were going to inspect one of the properties slated for renovation. It was just the two of us, plus a site manager. We drove out in separate cars. The property was in Brooklyn, an old warehouse district. It was windy. The air smelled of salt and rust. We walked through the building. The site manager stayed behind to check some schematics, leaving Julian and me alone in the main hall. The space was vast. Echoes bounced off the concrete floors. Dust motes danced in the light coming through the broken windows. I stopped walking. I turned to face him. He stopped too. He looked at me, waiting for me to speak about the structural integrity of the beams. I did not talk about the beams, I said. Sarah told me about the takeover. He flinched. It was small, but I saw it. His jaw tightened. He looked away out the window. Sarah talks too much, he said. His voice was flat. She was worried about you, I said. She said you signed the settlement to protect me. He was silent for a long time. The wind whistled through the cracks in the glass. It was necessary, he said finally. It was the only way to ring-fence your assets. You didn't ask me, I said. I didn't give you a choice. Because you would have said no, he said. He turned to look at me then. His eyes were tired. You would have tried to stay. You would have tried to fight, and you would have lost everything. I couldn't let that happen. You let me think you didn't care, I said. My voice was steady, but I could feel my heart beating in my throat. I thought you chose the money. I chose you, he said. I chose your safety, even if it meant you hated me. I took a step toward him. Julian, hate is easy. Clarity is hard. You robbed me of the chance to decide for myself. You treated me like a child who needed protecting, not a partner who could stand beside you. I was afraid, he said. The admission hung in the air between us. Julian Thorne, the billionaire, the titan of industry, was afraid. I was afraid that if you stayed, you would be destroyed, and I couldn't survive that. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear. I saw the love that had been hidden behind the coldness. I saw the man I had married, the man I had loved, still there beneath the scars. I have something to show you, I said. I reached into my bag. I did not pull out papers. I did not pull out a phone. I pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of Leo and Mia. They were at the beach, building a sandcastle. They were smiling. Their hair was windblown. They looked happy. I held it out to him. He took it. He looked down at the photo. He stared at it for a long time. His hand trembled. He traced the edge of the paper with his thumb. How old are they? He asked. His voice was barely a whisper. 6, I said. They were born 4 months after I left. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you didn't want them, I said. I thought you had chosen a life without us. I wanted to protect them from a father who didn't care. I would have cared, he said. I would have moved mountains. I know, I said, but I didn't know that then. I was operating on the data I had, just like you were. He looked back at the photo. A tear fell onto the glossy surface. He didn't wipe it away. Can I meet them? He asked. Not today, I said. Today is for us, today is for the truth. If we bring them into this now, it becomes about them. It becomes about custody and rights and schedules. I don't want that. I want you to understand that I am not keeping them from you out of anger. I am keeping them close because they are my priority. But if you want to be in their lives, you have to earn it. Not with money, not with gifts, with time. With presence, he nodded, he understood. He knew that money was the one thing he had too much of. Time was the one thing he had wasted. I want to try, he said. I want to try to be their father. I want to try to be. Whatever you will let me be. I took the photo back. I put it in my bag. Then we start with honesty, I said. No more secrets. No more protecting me from the truth. We face it together, even if it's hard. He nodded again. Together, we finished the site visit. We drove back to the city in silence, but it was a different silence. It was not the silence of separation. It was the silence of two people who had finally stopped shouting internally. It was the silence of a bridge being built, plank by plank. Over the next month, we established a routine. We met for coffee once a week, just us. We talked about everything except the children. We talked about work. We talked about the weather. We talked about the books we were reading. We rebuilt the friendship that had been the foundation of our relationship before the money and the pressure had complicated it. I watched him relax. I watched the lines around his eyes soften. He started to smile again, real smiles. Then, when I felt the ground was solid, when I felt that he was stable, I invited him to the house. It was a Saturday. The children were home. I told them that a friend was coming over. I did not tell them who he was. I wanted them to meet him as a person first. I wanted them to form their own impression. When he arrived, he was nervous. He brought a gift, but I told him to leave it in the car. Just bring yourself, I said. He knocked on the door. I opened it. He was wearing jeans and a sweater. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a man. Leo and Mia were in the living room, playing with Legos. They looked up when he walked in. They were shy. They hid behind the sofa. Julian knelt down. He did not reach for them. He did not try to hug them. He just sat on the floor. Hi, he said. I'm Julian, Leo peeked out. Are you Mom's friend? Yes, Julian said. I work with your mom. Mia came out from behind the sofa. She studied him. She walked up to him and looked at his eyes. You have gray eyes, she said. Like me, Julian said. Yeah, she said. Leo has gray eyes too. Is that so? Julian said. He looked at me. I was standing in the doorway watching. I nodded. He looked back at Leo. Can I see? Leo stepped out. He stood in front of Julian. They looked at each other. The resemblance was undeniable. It was like looking into a mirror from 20 years ago. Julian's breath hitched. He reached out a hand slowly, giving Leo the chance to pull away. Leo didn't pull away. He let Julian touch his shoulder. You're building a castle? Julian asked, pointing to the Legos. It's a fortress, Leo said. To keep the dragons out. Smart, Julian said. You need a good architect for a fortress. Mom is an architect, Leo said. I know, Julian said. She's the best. They started to talk. They talked about the fortress. They talked about the dragons. Mia joined in. She showed him how the drawbridge worked. Within 10 minutes, they were laughing. I watched from the kitchen. I made tea. I listened to the sound of their voices. It was the sound I had been waiting for. It was the sound of a family, but I knew it was fragile. I knew that one wrong move could break it. I waited until the evening. The children were asleep. Julian and I sat on the porch. The air was cool. The stars were out. They are incredible, he said. They are, I said. Thank you for letting me meet them. They need to know, I said. Eventually, but not yet. Let them get to know you first. Let them trust you. I understand, he said. I'm not going anywhere, Denise. I know I lost 5 years. I can't get that back, but I have the rest of their lives. I intend to use them. I believe you, I said, and I did. I believed him because I saw the change in him. He was no longer the man who hid behind lawyers. He was the man who sat on the floor and built fortresses. We spent the next year rebuilding. It was not a straight line. There were setbacks. There were days when the old fears came back. There were days when I wondered if I was foolish to trust him again. There were days when he wondered if he deserved forgiveness. But we talked. We used the tools we had learned. We communicated. When I felt insecure, I told him. When he felt overwhelmed, he told me. We did not let the silence grow. We did not let the assumptions take root. We watered the relationship with truth. He started to come to the house more often. He took the children to the park. He helped with homework. He learned their routines. He learned that Mia liked her toast cut into triangles and that Leo needed a nightlight that was exactly blue, not green. He learned the small things that make up a life. And I learned to let him in. I learned to trust him with the things I held most dear. It was scary, it was vulnerable, but it was worth it. One evening, about a year after he met them, we were all having dinner together. It was a simple meal. Pasta, salad, bread. The children were talking about school. They were animated, they were happy. Julian was listening, he was engaged. At one point, Leo looked at Julian. Are you my dad? He asked. The table went quiet. Mia stopped chewing. I looked at Julian. This was the moment. We had discussed it. We had agreed that when they asked, we would tell the truth. Julian put his fork down. He looked at Leo. Yes, he said. I am. Why didn't you live with us? Leo asked. Because I made a mistake, Julian said. I thought I was protecting your mom. But I was wrong. I should have talked to her. I should have stayed. But I'm here now. And I'm not going to leave. Leo thought about this. He looked at me. I nodded. Okay, Leo said. Can you help me with my math tomorrow? Yes, Julian said. I can do that. Mia smiled. Can you read to us? Yes, Julian said. I can do that too. And that was it. No drama, no tears, just acceptance. Children are resilient. They want love. They want stability. If you give them that, they forgive. They move forward. We did not move back into the same house immediately. We took our time. We merged our lives slowly. I kept my job. He kept his. We maintained our independence while building a partnership. It was a modern arrangement. It was based on equality. It was based on the understanding that we were two whole people choosing to be together, not two halves trying to make a whole. 6 months later, we decided to make it official. Not with a big wedding. Not with a press release, just us. We went to the courthouse. We signed the papers. This time when he signed, he looked at me. He smiled. I smiled back. The pen clicked shut. But this time, it didn't sound like an ending. It sounded like a beginning. We went home. The children were waiting. They had made a banner. It said, "Congratulations." We hung it in the kitchen, we ordered pizza, we celebrated, it was perfect. Looking back on the 5 years apart, I do not regret them. I do not wish they had never happened. Because in those years, I became the woman I needed to be. I became strong. I became clear. I learned that I could survive on my own. And because I knew I could survive on my own, I could choose to be with him without needing him. I could choose him out of love, not out of dependency. And he became the man he needed to be. He learned that power is not about control. It is about responsibility. It is about protecting the people you love, not by hiding them, but by standing with them. We had both grown, we had both changed. And because of that, we could make it work this time. The story of us is not a fairy tale. It is not a story of perfect love that never falters. It is a story of mistakes. It is a story of misunderstanding. It is a story of two people who lost their way and found their way back through the hard work of communication. It is a story of truth, and I think that is better than a fairy tale, because a fairy tale ends with happily ever after and implies that nothing else matters. But our story continues. Every day is a choice. Every day we choose to trust. Every day we choose to speak. Every day we choose to listen. And that is the real work of love. It is not the grand gestures. It is not the money. It is not the status. It is the quiet moments. It is the coffee in the morning. It is the help with homework. It is the hand held in the dark. It is the knowledge that when the storm comes, you do not have to face it alone. I remember the rain that day in the boardroom. I remember the coldness. I remember the fear. But I also remember the warmth of the porch that night. I remember the sound of my children laughing. I remember the feeling of Julian's hand in mine. I remember the clarity. I chose clarity over anger. I chose truth over vengeance. And because of that, I have everything. I have a home. I have a family. I have a partner. I have peace. And that is worth more than any settlement. That is worth more than any empire. It is the only wealth that matters, the only legacy that lasts. So if you are listening to this, if you are in the middle of the pain, if you are standing in the rain wondering why he walked away, I want you to know this. Wait. Breathe. Do not react. Seek the truth. Do not assume you know the motive. People are complex. Situations are complex. Love is complex. Give it time. Give it space. Let the dust settle. And when you can see clearly, make your choice. Choose the path that leads to peace. Choose the path that leads to truth. Because in the end, that is the only path that leads home. I am home now. We are home. And we are not leaving. The journey was long. It was hard. It was painful. But it was necessary. We had to break to become whole. We had to lose to find. And now that we have found, we will hold on. We will hold on tight. We will not let go. Not again. Not ever. The silence in the house is gone. It is filled with noise, with life, with love, and I would not change a thing. I would not change the pain. I would not change the years apart, because they brought me here. They brought me to this moment, to this truth, to this love, and that is enough. That is everything. The pen is down, the story is written. But the life goes on, and it is good. It is so good. I look at Julian sleeping on the couch. He is exhausted. He worked late. He played with the kids all day. He is peaceful. I cover him with a blanket. I turn off the light. I walk to the window. The city is still there. The lights are still shining. The world is still turning. But it does not threaten me anymore. I am not afraid of the city. I am not afraid of the money. I am not afraid of the past. I am secure. I am grounded. I am loved. And I am loving. That is the resolution. That is the end of the conflict. Not the defeat of an enemy. Not the winning of a battle. But the restoration of a bond. The healing of a breach. The return of trust. It is quiet. It is steady, it is real, and it is mine, ours, together, forever. This is what I wanted to tell you. This is what I needed to say, not to justify the past, not to explain the pain, but to share the hope. Because hope is the most important thing. Hope is the thing with feathers. Hope is the thing that keeps you going when the silence is too loud. Hope is the thing that brings you back to the table. Hope is the thing that lets you sign the paper again, with love, with trust, with truth, so I sign it. In my heart, every day, I sign it. And I know he does too. We are partners. We are parents. We are lovers. We are friends. We are home. And that is the story. That is the whole story. And it is enough. It has to be, because it is all we have. And it is everything we need. The rain has stopped. The sun is coming up. A new day, a new beginning. Again, always I am ready, we are ready. Let's go, let's live, let's love, let's be. This is the life we chose. This is the life we built. This is the life we keep. And it is beautiful. It is ours. And I am grateful, I am so grateful, for the pain, for the time, for the truth, for him, for them, for me, for us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for believing. It matters. It all matters. Every word, every tear, every smile, every step, it leads here, to this moment, to this peace. To this love, I am Denise. I am 35. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a woman, and I am whole. And that is the end. And the beginning. Good night, good morning, hello, welcome home, welcome to the truth, welcome to love, welcome to life. This is it. This is the story, and it is finished. But not really, because life goes on, and that is the best part. It goes on, and we are in it together, always together.